Guys, Cecil here once again. I wanted to do a video today and talk about what I consider round two of the 8th generation. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Xbox One X finally released this week, and this is kind of the official start of the new 4K era of the 8th generation. Now, the 8th generation consoles have been around for a while. You know, they've been out for almost 4 years now. The PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, the base models, originally launched back in 2013. And this is really the first time since probably the 4th generation, which with the 32X, where we've had kind of these mid-generational upgrades. Now, don't get me wrong, I am by no means comparing the PlayStation 4 Pro and the Xbox One X to the failure and waste of time that was the 32X. They are completely different systems and circumstances. There's no reason the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X won't be successful iterations of these current systems that are out right now. But I wanted to just kind of give you guys my 2 cents on the pros and cons of both and where I sit with both of them. So let's just kind of dive right into it and kind of talk about the Xbox One X first. So that just came out this week. It's $500, and right now they aren't wrong when they say on paper it is the most powerful console ever. There has never been a console with 6 teraflops of computing power, 12 gigs of RAM, 8 which is dedicated to gaming, and all that other wonderful technical jargon they can put out there to make a console spec sheet look amazing. So definitely power is not the Xbox One X's main problem. It is definitely the major pro of the system. And as Xbox in general, even since the original Xbox through the 360, the Xbox brand in general has always enjoyed pretty constant and strong third-party support, and a lot of third parties, including EA, Ubisoft, they're all Bethesda, they're all embracing the added horsepower of the One X on top of Microsoft's own studios. Really, generally, most games right now, from all the initial impressions and comparisons from places like Digital Foundry, a lot of Xbox One X games are kind of running at like 1800p. Some are native 4K, but it's the big AAA multiplats that a lot of people look at. It's like to really see what the upgraded horsepower of the console can do. And so far, it's doing a pretty good job of taking advantage of the extra computing power that the Xbox One X has, and the solid embrace from the third parties that Xbox has is definitely a major pro of it. And the other big thing is the fact it's the most powerful console. Is if you remember back when the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One first launched, Microsoft deemed it necessary to shoehorn the damn Kinect into the Xbox One, which caused it to be $500 instead of $400 compared to the base PS4. And they had to kind of cut back on specs of it a little bit. So multiplats, at least for the initial few years the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 systems were out, were sometimes inferior. Battlefield 4 was a good example. It was 900p on the PS4 versus 720p on the original Xbox One. So that won't be an issue anymore when we're comparing the PlayStation 4 Pro and the Xbox One X versions of games. The Xbox One X version is probably going to be the definitive version, at least from the graphics and frame rate department. It's going to be the best looking version of a lot of these multiplats. And just based on the higher resolution the Xbox One X is enjoying with a lot of these games, it takes better advantage of 4K TVs in comparison to the PlayStation 4 Pro. A lot of games, if they're not native 4K, they're much closer to 4K with a slight bit of upscaling than the PS4 Pro. And that, for tech heads and junkies wanting the maximum console to take best advantage of the system, and that kind of gets into the last major positive, the 4K Blu-ray player and the Xbox One X, for the most part enjoying the best overall media capabilities. The One X definitely has the best media and the best overall ability to take advantage of 4K TVs when we're looking purely at all the consoles that are available right now. So those, in my opinion, are really the key big positives of the Xbox One X. Now we're going to get into a few of the negatives. Now, On top of being the most powerful, it is also the most expensive. It is a $500 system, and the original Xbox One was $500 as well, and a lot of people didn't pick it up at that price. Now, to be fair, like I said, the Xbox One, the original model, at least when it launched, had the Kinect, and that added an extra $100 to the cost. So on paper, it would have only been $400 had there been a Kinect-less version out there. But $500 for a lot of people is a little bit more expensive than they'd like to spend on a system. And that $500 price point, on top of that, is basically double the price of the base Xbox One X, which is now the current model, which are generally around $280 right now. They can generally be had on sale for $250. I believe on Black Friday they're going to be $200 at most retailers, and compared to $500. That's a pretty significant price increase for that 4K capability. And casuals are the ones that drive the market. I know I've kind of said that before in other videos. But when you got, soccer family coming in with mom and, a couple of young kids looking at consoles, and they're really interested in the Xbox One, is she going to look at the 500 Xbox One X or, a 250 Xbox One S, and they all play the same games, even though the One X takes better advantage and the games look better? She's probably going to opt for the cheaper model because at the end of the day, they play the same games. So that's a big thing where I can see it potentially. The One X, while it's a compelling buy for a lot of the diehards, like gamers like us, people who post on websites, follow gaming news, and post videos like on YouTube like this. It's a great. We see the value in it, but for the casual gamer who dominates the market, they might not see that price difference as worth the extra cost. The other problem with the One X, and this is kind of with the Xbox One in general, is the weaker overall first-party lineup. This year has been a very, very poor first-party lineup compared to previous years of even the Xbox One, and not a lot of Xbox One first-party games that have come out this year. Forza 7 is pretty much the big one. There's Cuphead and Super Lucky Tales. Some of their big... There hasn't been like a really big AAA killer app like a Halo game this holiday to launch alongside the Xbox One X. Crackdown 3 was on paper supposed to be that game, but that one got delayed to the spring. So there's not, at least before Christmas this year, there's not really a big AAA game from Microsoft themselves that really takes advantage of the Xbox One X outside of Forza 7. Now, they've gone back and updated games like Gears of War 4 and stuff to take better advantage of the One X, but nothing like new and to get really people excited outside of Forza 7 that's releasing this holiday from Microsoft's own studios. And crossplay in general is going to continue to be a thorn in Microsoft's sides. Now, for a lot of people, that crossplay might be well worth it. You got your PC here. You want a quick box you can put under your TV, and you can bring your saves in between both devices. And a lot of people, I could see that being a big perk. But like I said, it's a double-edged sword. That also gives PC owners, at least specifically, or people who might consider gaming on PC, less reason to buy an Xbox One, let alone a $500 Xbox One X, especially if they got a gaming PC that can already do 4K gaming easily enough. And PC gamers are a big part of the dedicated PC market. So those, to me, are really the downsides of the One X. The few I listed there. So that kind of gives me my 2 cents on the One X. Let's talk about the PlayStation 4 Pro now for a little bit. The first one is it's more affordable than the Xbox One X. It's $400 versus $500. And for people looking at both systems and want a console that can take advantage of a 4K TV, and games are what they're mainly looking at, the Pro being $100 cheaper might seem like the better buy. Cost to a lot of people is a big thing. Also, it's only $100 more than the base PS4 compared to double the price with the One S versus the One X. So if someone's already looking at a $300 PlayStation 4, there's a $400 version over here that's going to take shiny new advantage of my... take advantage of my shiny new 4K TV I bought in the last 12 months. I might as well spend the extra $100 if it's within the budget, and I've got a better system that can take advantage of my 4K TV better than that base PS4 that's only $300. Also, right for now, the PS4 Pro has been on the market for a year longer, and for now, it has a wider selection of games that take better advantage of the added horsepower of the Pro compared to the One X. Now, over time, that is going to go away because more games now, as time goes on, will start supporting the One X. There will be patches and updates, and games will slowly expand on the One X to support them. But for right now, between now and probably the first 6 months, the One X is out compared to the PS4 Pro. The Pro definitely has both more first and third-party games that take advantage of the extra horsepower of the Pro. Also, just Sony in general and PlayStation 4 being the market-leading console, it has a really solid first-party lineup in comparison to the first-party on Microsoft. You know, just this year, Horizon Zero Dawn, PlayStation's the only place to get baseball, the Crash Bandicoot remaster, Uncharted 4, just a whole slew and a very strong first-party lineup, especially compared to what they also have coming in 2018 with like the new God of War, Spider-Man, Sony's first party is definitely cranking out hit after hit on top of very strong third-party support. Not to say the Xbox One doesn't have it, but PS4 has it just as good. It gets every major third-party game, and it also probably gets more support from Japan than the Xbox One does, just based on the fact PlayStation is basically the go-to power console in Japan. The Xbox One isn't even really a blip on the radar in Japan. If it tells you anything how much the Xbox One is struggling in Japan, retailers are so desperate to sell it in Japan, they're branding it as a 4K Blu-ray player as an alternative to being a game console, because Japanese gamers just aren't buying the Xbox One at all. It's kind of sad to see. I mean, Microsoft has always had trouble selling Xbox in Japan, but this generation, it's almost comical if you look at the weekly sales, how the PlayStation 4, the Switch, compared to the Xbox One, it's not even fucking close. And the other advantage, kind of going back to price a little bit, that the Pro has is they can afford to get into a price war. Being the cheaper console, Sony can, all right, well, the One X is out for $500, so I don't think they're going to do it this holiday, but next spring, Sony could lower the price of the PS4 $50. And Microsoft, at least right away, isn't going to be able to lower the Xbox One X's price very quickly. So we'll say, March, April, tax time rolls around, Sony can drop the price of the PS4 Pro down to $350 and maybe $250 for the base model. So all of a sudden that $100 price difference goes to $150, and getting into a price war, Sony has an advantage over the Xbox One being the cheaper console. But that kind of goes into the negatives of the PS4 Pro. With it being out a year longer, it's also weaker than the Xbox One. And a lot of the game comparisons, websites again like Digital Foundry have done, the PlayStation 4 Pro version generally has been the weaker version. PS4 Pro games maybe have been around 1200p to 1440p compared to 1600 to 1800p on the Xbox One. Shadow of War was a good example where that was able to take advantage of the high-res 4K textures. The PS4 Pro version couldn't do it because the PS4 Pro didn't have enough RAM to run the 4K texture pack. So the textures on Shadow of War look much better than compared to the PlayStation 4 Pro, which is only able to run the game at a higher resolution with the standard Xbox One and PS4 textures. And third-party multiplats, again, probably aren't going to look as good overall. And also, now, I said before the One S and the One X were about double the price in price difference from one another. The PS4 Pro isn't as big of a jump power-wise from the base PS4 if you think about it. So people looking at 300 versus 400, and this kind of goes back to that casual market again. Well, if the Pro isn't much more powerful than the base PS4, and I only have a 1080p TV, which for right now a lot of people still do, they might not see much of an advantage of getting the PS4 Pro, even if it can probably run a lot of those PS4 games at a higher frame rate and things like that and still take advantage of the extra horsepower. They might still just opt for the $300 console because all they're looking at doing is playing games. And that kind of goes, I think the stat earlier this year, I don't know about sales now, but earlier this year, I think it was through summer, only 1 out of every 5 PlayStation 4s being sold since the Pro launched last holiday through this last summer. Only 1 out of 5 were Pros. So at least for right now, a lot of people buying PS4 are still buying that $300 base model. They're not spending $400 on the Pro. Now that may change as time goes on. People may trade up or want a system that can take advantage of 4K TVs better, especially if Sony starts lowering the price of the Pro. But for right now, that $100 price difference, at least for standard HD TV owners, for people who haven't jumped on that 4K bandwagon yet, they might not see much of benefit of spending that extra $100. And the other thing with the PS4 Pro compared to the One X and even the Xbox One S is the PS4 Pro does not have as strong media capabilities. You get all your streaming stuff, but that lack of a 4K Blu-ray player, some people might want to buy physical discs or rent them. The Xbox One X and the One S have a 4K Blu-ray player. The PS4 Pro does not. Now, to be fair, physical media in general is a slowly but surely kind of dying medium. You know, movies are more and more like music being absorbed either streaming or digital download. But there are still people out there that like having physical discs, and having a cheap 4K Blu-ray player for that market that takes advantage of a 4K TV compared to the PS4 Pro, which only has a standard Blu-ray player, that could be a selling point for a lot of people. So I guess overall, guys, where do I stand on the whole thing? To me, at the end of the day, you really can't go wrong with either one. I went with the PlayStation 4 Pro, but that's because I'm a bigger fan of JRPGs. And things like that. The Japanese support was a compelling buy for me, and why I had a PlayStation 4 originally a few years ago, why I bought one for games like Street Fighter V and all the JRPGs that come to PS4. So for me personally, that was a big reason I also got a PlayStation 4 Pro a few weeks back versus waiting and buying an Xbox One X, because the Pro has more games that I'm specifically looking for. I will say, for the most part, Microsoft needs to do a better job of getting their first-party house in order, because, well, they're coasting pretty heavily on third-party support right now. They've got Crackdown and Sea of Thieves next spring. I'm sure there's a Halo 6 coming at some point, and I'm sure we'll probably get Forza Horizon 4 next fall. It seems like they got the Forza series kind of going every other year between the numbered Forza and the Horizon series. So you'll have a good racing game from them every year. But compared to even a couple of years ago, the first-party output from Microsoft has been pretty weak in comparison to the first-party output of PlayStation 4. But overall, at the end of the day, if you want a power console, the One X is a really good buy. If you don't really care so much about first-party games, you want the most powerful system that can take better advantage of 4K TVs, you have the money to spend $500, you want a 4K Blu-ray player and a broad selection of games to play, the One X is a solid buy. For me, personally, PlayStation 4 was the better buy because it had more of what I was looking for. The Pro, to me, is worth the extra $100 just because of the 4K better capability it can take advantage of, because I'm in the market for a 4K TV. It just has more of the games I'm personally looking for. Every person and gamer is different. In my mind, if you have to pick between one or the other, when people ask me that question, since I work at GameStop a lot, they ask me, PS4, Xbox One, which do you prefer? I say you literally look at two things. What are your family and friends playing, and whose exclusives do you prefer? Do you prefer God of War, Gran Turismo, and Uncharted on PlayStation? If you want a baseball game every year, you got to go PlayStation. Or on Xbox, you got Halo, Gears of War. They got the best definitive racing series in the Forza series, so racing games are always strong on Xbox. Those are the things you should look at the end of the day. Power is great and all, but that really doesn't dictate the overall success of a console. It really comes down to your preferences, what your buddies and families are playing, and what you are looking for in a system. But at the end of the day, in my mind, you really can't go wrong with either. It's a great time to be a gamer, and you might be wondering, where does this leave Switch overall? Switch actually, and I've mentioned this before in other videos, Switch is actually benefiting from this kind of reset of the 8th generation with the Pro versus the One X. Because launching a new console halfway through a traditional cycle isn't actually a bad thing, just for the fact most games are still going to be made with the base PS4 and Xbox One in mind, and at least with some games like Doom, third-party multiplats are within shouting distance on the Switch. So to me, Switch is at least, we're going to at least get another 3 years or so, in my opinion, out of this current generation before we'd see a PlayStation 5 and a new Xbox. And so that to me means Switch will not be replaced anytime soon. It's going to get a minimum of 3 or 4 years of support before Nintendo would be looking at upgrading to maybe a more powerful Switch. So just for that fact, the reset here actually benefits Switch, because games are still going to be made for the base PS4 and Xbox One, and the Switch, at least with some third-party multiplats, is within shouting distance of that, and that's the most important thing, as well as the Switch being able to use engines like Unreal and Unity and things like that. So what do you guys take on this whole, mid-generation upgrade and the PS4 Pro versus the Xbox One X? Leave me your comments down in the down below the video. And as always, guys, you take it easy, and I'll see you next time.